our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you, joining us from London, the Senior Vice President of Engineering at Snyk, a leader in developer security. Prior to joining the company, Patrick Poels played a pivotal role in leading everybody's favorite event platform, if you know what I mean, engineering team from startup to IPO. And he also won the World Series of Poker Bracelet twice. That's amazing, showcasing his competitive spirit and strategic thinking. Patrick is committed to innovation, collaboration, and customer success. He is dedicated to making security an integral part of every developer's toolkit. Patrick, where are you? Can I see you? Come here to the stage. Welcome him with a warm applause. Come on.
So super excited to be here at Techsylvania, and I'm going to get the opportunity to talk with all of you about some things that I learned over the course of time. 30 years of being a software engineer and leading engineering teams, and hopefully some things that will be helpful for all of you. So first, before I dive into talking about our company and talking about those learnings, let me give you a little bit about me. I'm not sure if you could tell from the first 30 seconds of me talking without the microphone on, but I'm American, so I'm not a British accent, but I am based in London. So I moved to London 3 years ago in order to take the role with Snyk, which we'll talk about quite a lot. So 3 years at Snyk, but I've been in the engineering field for a very long time. First, maybe 10 years or so as a assembly language developer at a company called Ticketmaster, and then moving into more kind of leadership and kind of executive roles over the course of time. I have 3 sons. They're all back in Arizona, which is where I'm from, 29, 27, and 24. So I'm sure you can tell I started when I was like 12, right? The thing that's like interesting, I think, to know about me is I don't have an undergrad degree. So when I started in college, at university, I started pursuing electrical engineering. And I didn't actually even know what that was. I think my high school guidance counselor told me that I was good at math, so maybe this is what I should do. I got into it and I tried it, and I was taking classes and pursuing this, but I also needed some extra money for beer, because you need that at college. And I found a job in the paper for this company called Ticketmaster. I went and applied for it, and it was something that I guess I had some aptitude for whatever they were looking for, and I got this role. I worked with them for about a year, and then they offered me a job for whenever I graduated. So when you get finished with your electrical engineering degree, if you want to, you can come to work for us. And they told me the amount of money, and it felt like all the money in the world to me. So I asked them, well, do I actually have to graduate? Do I have to have my EE degree? And they said no. And so that was my last day of college. I didn't go again after that. For anybody who's making choices like this today, stay in school. Like I'm not trying to give you that advice. It's not the easiest path, but it's my path. And then 15 years at Ticketmaster, and then after those 15 years, I did spend 5 years of my life playing poker for a living. It was a hobby I had developed over the course of maybe the 5 years before. It was a time in the world where the economies were very, very good, so there was a lot of like money, disposable income that people had from selling homes or selling cars, or they had a restaurant or something like this. And also poker was all over television. So it was actually pretty easy for a while to make very good money. I probably should have gotten out. I started in 2005. I probably should have gotten out about 2008 when the economy went like this, and it would have been a good time to sort of put poker aside. But I stuck with it for 2 more years. And I did have the good fortune of winning a couple of World Series of Poker bracelets during that time. So one in 2005, one in 2006. So that's mostly about me. The company that I'm representing is a company called Snyk. Not sure how many of you have heard of this company, but I think what we're doing in the industry is pretty amazing. We're trying to make it easy for developers to basically write secure code right from the start and all the way through the process. So I think a lot of times people talk about this as trying to shift left and trying to do things early in the process, but the reality is for us, we really think it's a continuum. And we show this with this beautiful chart showing that kind of the whole infinity graph of everything that's happening in an SDLC. And so our job is to make securing software applications incredibly easy for developers. One quick graph to show a little bit about the way it all works. So They're an ecosystem of several different products that we've created. We started with open source vulnerability detection and remediation. We went into containers and Terraform, and then eventually, a couple years ago, we started our first static analysis product, which is something that is fed by a really strong AI and ML team that are focused just on program analysis. I think you probably, maybe when you saw the title of this talk, you thought you might get away from the AI talk for a couple of minutes, but I had to say it. But it's definitely a part of what we do. And then we also have a bunch of companies that we work with as partners because we're trying to make sure that we give a complete solution to our customers. And so that's all very important for us. And I think that I'm super proud of what we've done and what we are doing. And we're really very much in the early start of this journey. But I also don't want to make this talk commercial about Snyk. So I want to tell you about things that we've learned and hopefully give you things that are helpful. If you want to find me after and you want to learn more about what we do at Snyk, I'm absolutely happy to do that. So, getting started and trying to get through into the story of these three things that I think are really key learnings, I think it'll be helpful if I tell you a little bit of a story of how Snyk started and where we are and basically what I mean by distributed teams. So Snyk started in 2016, and it was founded by three people who served together in the Israeli Defense Forces. And when the company started, one of those founders was in London, and the other two were in Tel Aviv. And because they were founding from two different places, they made the decision early on that it would be beneficial for us to build our engineering teams and our product teams and everything we were building, we'd do it from both locations. So you could say that basically every team from the start of Snyk would be something like 3 engineers in London and 2 engineers in Tel Aviv and a product manager in Tel Aviv. And it would be a mix like this right from the start. And even today, even though we've made acquisitions in different places and we've grown the team to a pretty large size, we're about 1,100 people total and about 400 in R&D. If you look across our teams, 45 teams, you'll see that we only have 6 of them that have all team members in the same location, in the same country even. And that's almost like it's a bug if we have everyone in the same spot. We've done it by design to say it's better for us to have the kind of diversity of thought and diversity of culture and diversity of everything in what we build. And actually those 6 teams really they're teams that come to us via acquisition. And we just haven't gotten to a place where we've hired more into those teams yet. But I think if you spin it forward for any of those 6 teams another year, you'll be in a place where we can no longer say they're all in one location. By the way, yesterday, I should have said this on my last slide, yesterday we were going through a quarterly launch exercise that we do. We do a little webinar and tell everyone about, here's the great things that Snyk have done over the course of the last quarter. Here's what we're shipping out to the world. And as a part of that talk, we got a chance to tell the world that we acquired Enzo Security yesterday. So we just got the signature done. It's not really super publicized yet. I'm probably not even supposed to be saying this up on stage, so maybe don't tweet it all out everywhere. But we did announce it in that launch event, and super excited to have them joining us to try and be a part of that ecosystem and make a more holistic solution for our customers. So what you see here for these different locations, they represent Boston is where we have our corporate offices, and we have some engineers there that came from an acquisition called Topcoat, and some that came from an acquisition of a company called Fugue. We have a team in Malmo that came from acquisition as well, from Foss ID. We have the Tel Aviv teams. We have Cluj, which we've just started. And I'm massively excited about being here in Cluj and starting our teams here. And it's not brand new starting today. We did open an office just yesterday, which is amazing. But I think we've hired a leader here that we really trust. Radu Farkas is out there in the crowd someplace. And if you know Radu, he's a terrific engineering leader. And so we'll talk about kind of why that's the direction we wanted to go. But Cluj is going to be a huge part of what we do going forward. So excited to be here and helping to get that started. And then the last one would be Zurich, which was, I talked about the AI part. We acquired a company called Deepcode, which is based in Zurich and came out of the ETH University doctoral program. Okay, so get to the meat of the things we're going to talk about, and then I'll make sure we have some room for questions too. But basically, 3 things that that have really hit home for me over the course of time in trying to build distributed teams. Not just at Snyk, but also, you mentioned my last company, Eventbrite. You whispered it, so I'm not sure if I should say their name or not, but I led engineering at Eventbrite for 9 years. San Francisco-based company, and when I started there, the whole staff was in San Francisco, but over the course of time, we made acquisitions, and we started teams, and we grew in different places, and I learned a bunch of things from trial and error and learning from that company as well. So we'll talk about those, both of these two companies and things that we learned. But basically, 3 things I think that are super important to know, and hopefully will be helpful for you. The first one, brilliant, driven engineers don't all look the same. So there are smart, driven people everywhere. There's a bunch of them in Cluj. There's a bunch of them pretty much anywhere you go. But there's things about the different places where you might be that where you're going to experience things that are different, and you have to be open to that. If you're not open to it, then you might find that you don't actually get to take advantage of hiring great people in some of those locations because they might not look like what you think you're looking for. You need to hire great leaders and get out of their way. You need to find a person like Radu in a place like Cluj and give him a lot of room to run, him or her, whoever your leader is, and make sure that they have your support, but also that you don't get in their way. And then finally, I think it's super important to understand that if you're going to have distributed teams or you're going to have teams in different locations, you can't expect that they're going to do the shit work. Like you have to make sure that everybody has got things that are important and exciting and things that are going to help drive the company forward. And don't think of these other locations as places to do bug fixing or static landing pages or whatever. You're not going to get A players if you do that. So let's just dive into these 3. Like I made sure I made this presentation as kind of simple and direct and straightforward as possible, so I could make sure that I kept everybody. But I think what about those people don't look the same? I gave you my own profile. I told you I don't have a CS degree from Stanford or MIT or whatever, but I was an engineer at Ticketmaster for 15 years, and I ended up being a vice president of engineering in that place. And I've had a long career in the field since then, and I don't look like what someone might have been looking for in the role. And I think that we need to be able to look for the specific things that you're trying to find, not for signals like what kind of degree do you have, or I'll tell you like a story about Eventbrite and a mistake we were making early on that we eventually corrected. We thought that because our company was based in San Francisco and we had other engineers in Nashville and everybody spoke English, that we would need to make sure that whoever we hired in Argentina, which was one of our acquisitions, that they needed to speak English as well. And for a while, maybe 6 months, 8 months, we were declining people because their English wasn't very good, which is ridiculous. I mean, it's absolutely a terrible decision that we made. And the truth is, as long as you have the ability to communicate both directions with the office, it doesn't mean that you have to have every single person be super fluent in English. In fact, the fact that we were looking at things that way made us sort of devalue some people who were incredibly strong engineers, but they weren't confident enough in the language to be able to speak up in meetings and things like this. And so there was just some learning for us to say, okay, this idea that we had that everyone had to speak great English is actually really, really bad. So I think it's important to make sure you understand what is it you're actually looking for, what's a real signal of very smart, very driven people who are going to be mission driven and stay with you and not leave for $1 extra and all of those things. Look for those things. Don't look for things that are kind of what you think you may have seen in your other teams. This one is super important, and again, I've made mistakes here in the past. It's really important to find people who they're connected with you from a values perspective. They want the same things that you want, but you need to make sure you give them room to run. And I think Radu is a good example. He's been with our company now for 1.5 years, and I think he's done some incredible work in hiring people into the team. We've already got 40 folks in Romania, and I think we had 9 in Cluj start this week. We have 1 start date per month, and we had 9 just start. So we're doing a really good job now. But I would say 6 months ago, Radu he had some handcuffs on, and it was partially because those 45 teams that I talked about, historically, those teams are all hiring people themselves. And I wanted to get started in Cluj, and Radu wanted to get started in Cluj, but the other 45 managers just wanted to have the next person that they could hire. They didn't have the incentive of us really trying to move here. And so they were doing things like, well, they're hiring where they are. So if those managers were in London or they were in Tel Aviv, they were interviewing people locally, and so we just weren't getting the momentum we needed to get right here in Cluj. And the best thing that we decided to do just fairly recently was we changed that model some so that Radu actually doesn't have to adhere to the same sort of hiring limits that other teams do. He can build teams here and build, kind of pretty aggressively. He can build with senior staff, he can build with junior staff, and then they'll work in Radu's teams, but they'll also be feeders into other parts of the organization. So instead of having 45 teams who are all trying to hire, they'll say, well, I need another person, and Radu's got a bunch of extra people on his team, and so I would like one of those people on your team who's been showing great progress for 6 months. I'd like to have one of those people onto our team. And that's a model that we're going to adopt, or we have adopted. And I think since then, Radu's been able to actually move much, much faster in hiring people. I know there are fantastic people here in Cluj, and we're already excited with the results that we're having, but he wasn't really able to move as fast as possible until I got out of his way. Okay, and then the last point before we get to any questions you might have is, nobody wants to do unimportant work. I think that everybody loves to be able to say they've got incredible engineers on their team, but your really, really strong engineers are not going to do work forever that is like uninspiring and unimportant, work that feels like it's unimportant. And I think that that's the biggest mistake I hear engineering leaders in other places when they start to think about how might I have a different team in this spot or in that spot or in that spot, is like I can let the engineers we have do the really important stuff, and then I can offload some of this more maybe grunt work to other people in other spots. And I just think it's a recipe for getting B and C players. Or if you do have an A player on the team, that person they're going to get tired of doing things that don't feel like they're inspiring or important. And so the fact that we have our teams spread and distributed and that every team has got members from different places makes it really easy for us to ensure that the people who are working here in Cluj don't feel like they're working on things that are less important. They're right in the middle of all the things that we're doing. There's going to be AI work happening out of here, and basically every other important thing that we do. There'll be engineers from the team here who are participating in those things. Sometimes the work you have to do is not exciting and sexy. Sometimes there is stuff that is more blocking and tackling that you have to do, but I think as long as those things are more on a rotation basis, and it's not just the job of the team in whatever, like Argentina, like I had in the last company, or Cluj or whatever, as long as that job is not just let's have the unimportant work, you'll be able to attract really good people, and you'll be able to have strong contributors, and you'll be able to keep them. Okay, I went through it pretty quick because I wanted to make sure there was room for questions if anybody has them. That's my 3 things. I'm Pat Poels at Snyk, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions? Raised hands. I see there. I see more. Ooh, coming.
Yeah. Hello, Patrick. I'm Ionuț, and I was just catching on that part where you mentioned that there were some language barriers in Argentina and have great engineers there, but that were not speaking good English. And how did you overcome that problem specifically?
Yeah, good question. So we had a vendor who I'm very close to. I actually do advisory work for them now, called Lingo Live, and they were language coaching, and they were basically you could contract with them and have take classes when it's convenient for you on an individual basis. So they would have teachers who were in Mexico or Spain or whatever who were able to teach people like me teach us Spanish, and then also teach English to people who were in Argentina in that office. And I think a little small thing that I did myself and some of our other managers in the U.S. did was helpful, which is to try and start learning Spanish. And so like I spent 4 years. Because I'm American, I'll tell you, I'm really good at Spanish. Actually, I'm not terrific, but I've done hour-long presentations in Spanish, slowly, because I have to do all the translations still myself. But I think it's helpful for everyone to be able to learn, like, okay, I'm in your shoes. I'm trying to learn this other language just like you're doing. And I learned firsthand that if I wasn't feeling good about my ability to speak Spanish, I was far less likely to speak up in a meeting or to talk or to tell people to slow down or whatever. So there was a lot of years of having people learn English, but at the same time, if you have team leaders, managers in the teams who do speak really good English, and you're not there every day when they're doing all their work in the office in Mendoza, Argentina, it doesn't matter if they're speaking Spanish there. Like, let's go crazy, speak it, whatever language you want.
That's also true. Also, an option to have like an intermediary level and discussing in their own language. But
exactly.
This part with learning and happening on the both sides, it's like a really good strategy. Yeah, congrats, congrats on that. Thank you.
Gracias.
Hi. So also on a communication matter, how do you make sure the cultural difference it's not an impediment in communication between teams?
It can be. Cultural differences can be impediments for sure. But I think it's really important for especially leaders to set the example with this, but the cultures are different, and you can expect that people are going to react to things differently. So when I say they look different, I don't mean appearance or just accent. I sound very American, so it's not just accent. It's also, how likely are you to say what you think if you're frustrated about something or you don't agree with an opinion or whatever. I mean, as it turns out, the engineers in the UK might be more frustrated but say it less, and the engineers in Tel Aviv might be less frustrated and say it more. And like being aware that that's the case is super helpful in communication. Like I think that we try to have our leaders read the book, The Culture Map, so they can understand some of the specific cultural differences there. And that doesn't tell you everything, but a piece of it is just being really open to the cultural differences. Like it's not really a big deal, but Radu fed me some food that I haven't had before today, and like I'm trying to be open to everything that I can and learning about as much about the culture here as I possibly can. But I think like generally if you have values that are important to you and those values come through in the people that you hire, the rest of the cultural stuff is stuff you can get by and get around.
Thank you.
How would you describe the differences and maybe the pros and cons of managing a team in an office versus remote?
We're having this conversation quite a lot in my company right now because I think there are parts of the company who feel really strongly that it's important to get people back in an office and to work together and have that camaraderie that exists from doing that, and also being able to teach each other. And I think there's merits to it, there's benefits to it. But at the same time, for teams that are located in one location, I think it makes great sense. But for teams like we have in R&D, where we've actually built our teams in a very distributed fashion, it doesn't make a ton of sense to me to say to a manager, okay, you need to come into the office 2 days a week. If your whole team is spread out across the world, like what are you doing? You're taking the Zoom from the office instead of doing it from your home. I think providing opportunities for people to get together and have that kind of camaraderie is an important thing. Used to be that people would say, well, you can't innovate and you can't plan and you can't do these things unless you're in the same room. But I think we've all proven that you can use Miro and you can do other things and you can collaborate just fine and create plans. But I don't think there's any substitute for the camaraderie. So you still have to get together occasionally. I just don't think it has to be, for me, I don't think it has to be every week.
Thank you. Coming. I see a hand here.
I'm sorry if I wasn't looking at whoever asked the question. I can see the front couple rows and it's kind of dark in the back, so I couldn't tell.
Hello. When hiring people from another country, what kind of legal issues, as usual, do you have, and how do you solve them?
I mean, it's a good question, but I don't have a good answer. So I'm in a company that has legal department that does a lot of this work for me, and so sometimes what I hear is, let's not hire over there because the challenges of hiring over there are incredibly large. You saw our little map of where we have engineering hubs. I think in all of those places, it's relatively friendly for employers to be able to hire and to be able to operate their businesses. And that even means that when you get to that point in time where a thing's not working out and you have to let people go, which unfortunately it's a part of, it's a part of life. It happens. We try to make sure that we're in spots where it's relatively easy to hire people. It's relatively easy to promote them. It's relatively easy to give them equity, which is a part of the way we reward people. And it's relatively easy to offboard if we decide that we need to let someone go. All those things together, which is why I think there are some countries where it's more difficult that you wouldn't see on that map.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions?
Yeah, so another one came into my mind. So you said about you extended in Romania recently, here in Cluj, actually.
Yep.
And how was the decision related to the war in Ukraine, for instance? Because Romania is pretty close to that, and we also interacted with companies in US that had specific reasons and concerns regarding should we move to Romania, or it's like a hit zone here, and pretty close.
Yeah, I don't know if this answer is great or not, but I'll give it. I don't think any place is perfect. I think there's going to be challenges. You know, I spent 9 years living in San Francisco and leading a company there on the engineering side, and I think there are lots of things about San Francisco that are completely not perfect. Every place where we've had an engineering hub, any place I've been, hasn't been perfect. I think there's some things that are really incredible about being here, and there's also some things that are potential challenges like this. I really wasn't all that worried about that as a blocker. And I'll also tell you, like, there's a reason why it was a number 2 point on my list. Before we made a decision of where to go, we had a few places that we were looking and thinking about and whatever, but I needed to have that leader that I felt was very, very connected with my values and the values of the company, and that I could trust that person, because I really firmly believe that you make better decisions closer to the metal and further down in the organization, and I don't want to be having to feel like I need to look over the person's shoulder or always course correct or whatever. So for me, we looked at a few different countries of where we thought we might go next, and I had a fairly open mind about the different things that could happen in these countries. But I was super happy with the leader that we found, and I was super happy with the and I'm not just saying this because I'm standing up on stage and this is being recorded, but I was super happy with the diversity statistics that I found in Romania. I found that there are places where it's much, much more difficult to feel like you can get started and have the right level of gender diversity and just diversity in general. And I felt like that was something that is very possible to do here. And I was in our lunchroom yesterday in our brand new office, and I think there were 15 people in this picture, and there were 7 women in the picture. It was fantastic. Nice. I mean, just absolutely fantastic. It's hard to do because of the attendance and kind of the gender diversity in colleges in different places, but I feel like we have a leg up here, which is fantastic.
Yeah, maybe very short, what other locations you consider maybe in Europe or close by to Romania?
I was pretty close to Warsaw. Like I had a
Poland,
person
Poland,
there,
okay.
a person there who I thought was a really terrific leader, and I thought Radu was better, and I thought that the diversity statistics here were better. So both those 2 things were the reason we went here instead of there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.